Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is September 7th, 2023, 9:21 a.m., and we are following up a Wednesday that was bloody red. Apple, 7.5% of the S&P fell, 3.8% yesterday. Pre-market is obviously down. When you have a down day like that, the market tends to continue to go down. Today is going to be one of the most interesting days all year because I don't think we've had a day. I mean, we've had red days, but yesterday was a red day. It was just all stocks at one moment decided to fall at the same time. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how things continue to perform today. I expect things to fall in the pre-market. We are very red. There's a lot of reasons for why we're red that we're going to get into. The Apple news for why we fell is because of the headline of this show. China has banned all governmental entities from using iPhones. And you think that Apple does God knows how many hundreds of billions of dollars worth of product manufacturing within China would be untouchable. Nope. The CCP said, you know what? We don't really care what you've been able to do. We are going to do what we need to be able to do. So we got a lot to discuss today. Larmo, Miami Ren, Miguel, F3, Ty Gorton, Persian Prince, Cold Monkey, John Schwartzbeck, Edmund, Seth Roth, Pete, Auntie, Joseph Viegas, TJ, FR3, Dario, AMC, or sorry, not AMC, Practical Investing. We'll see what happens to AMC in a second. Tabor, Broccoli Bob, Benny, Mark LeBlanc, JK1281, Power Napster, Gene Philippe, Juan, Carlos, Christopher George. I get paid to wait. Thank you all for being here. Billy, Jack, Dan, Peter, Morrow. I hope you all are having a great morning. Good morning from Toronto. Good morning to the 6. I love Toronto. I've never been there. I've been to Montreal, but love Toronto. My favorite rapper is from Toronto. Jose, good morning. Thank you for being here. Palantir, as Reza says in the chat, is under $15. Palantir is bloody red. 1482 is exactly where we went in one day when the Morgan Stanley report came out. Let me pull up the charts in a second. On top of that, you got PayPal that's down at $62, down 1%. Robinhood down 1.3%. SoFi at $8.34. My portfolio was down $5,000 yesterday total. I will tell you guys what happens as the market opens. I'm anticipating a $7,000 drop as I open up my portfolio, just because I have options on some of these stocks and they are going to be incredibly volatile today, given the stocks are volatile as well. Now, it'll be interesting to see if the stocks get volatile enough to move it into the direction of new lows. So, for example, SoFi has not touched $7 in a very long time, right? So that would be very, interesting if SoFi can get there. Palantir has not touched 13 in a while. It'll be interesting if Palantir can get there. Robinhood really hasn't touched $9 in a while. So either the dip will continue to dip pretty aggressively, or it will be bought up by the end of the day because the market realizes that these are idiotic prices. Nvidia, $455 as the market is in the pre-market. It ended at $470 yesterday, which is, look, that's tough. Nvidia was at $485 last time I remember during the market open yesterday when we were doing it. So, Nvidia obviously took a nasty, nasty fall. Let me just tweet this out right now. We're doing the market open. And so we're obviously seeing a pretty red market. Now, in terms of the China news, I just want to clarify. I think some people in the chat are asking, no, existing iPhone users are not having their iPhones confiscated in China. The problem is new clients, like the governmental, like the government organization, is not being able to access or buy new phones. And that is the biggest issue. Now, one would argue, why is this happening? And there is a very kind of new sentiment around how you can say buy China first products that's going on in China right now. And because that's happening, China from a governmental perspective is doing this. Now, this is a weird decision because China's economy is collapsing at a precipitous rate. And as a result of that, you would argue that they just want more economic stimulus and activity and movement. So if people want to buy the iPhone, damn it, let them buy the iPhone. But it seems like their ideological communist tendencies are saying, even if our economy is collapsing, we are still going to impose these artificial forms of regulatory enforcements in order to get Chinese companies to do better, which are probably not going to help the economy as much as people just buying iPhones, quite frankly, because iPhones are a better product. They'll be able to buy more goods and services. They'll be able to buy more Chinese apps like WeChat, all that stuff. So It's not a good thing at all. But China's government is so idiotic and dumb. And I can say that because I'm in America and not in China. And I never want to go to China because they probably have a record of all the shit I've said. And as soon as I step foot, they're going to be like, come with me for a second. Yeah, I'm not doing that shit. So in general, they're just not a company or a country that is friendly to companies. And that's why we're seeing this stuff go down. Let's go to C3 AI. They had earnings yesterday. C3 down 12% in the pre-markets. They were down 6% yesterday. Look, their earnings, they're doing $72 million a quarter. I had Sachin join me yesterday on the Palantir daily live stream. I'll make a clip of that and post it on the channel a little bit later today. But, essentially his argument was that this company tries to overhype itself way more than they can. They're up 200% year to date. The AI boom and enterprise AI adoption is happening, but C3 AI is basically saying that they're the companies, they're the one that's going to capture the entire market. And you're doing 70 million of revenue a quarter. Palantir does 70 million from like 3 clients. And on top of that, they've lowered guidance and they're growing negative 10% year over year, but they're up 200% year to date. So, I mean, this is one of those things where if there is an AI bubble, C3 is getting ready to pop. If it is, I genuinely think that more AI stocks will not pop because the bubble, the hype is real and some stocks are just going to benefit from it. But in terms of buying the stock on their earnings, it's just the earnings were laughable for the stock. So I wouldn't imagine it. And speaking of Sachin's in the chat. I highly recommend anyone who has any dreams or career aspirations or wants to start a company, go to the last section. It starts at 40 minutes of the chat I did with Sachin last night. It ended up being a 50-minute chat for that segment in and of itself. And I guarantee you those 50 minutes will not waste your time. I mean, Sachin is building his own company right now, and he gave a lot of words of wisdom on terms of how he's navigating the startup landscape and just the mental health landscape of trying to start something in the world. As someone who has done a lot of career choices. So highly recommend going to that part of the podcast. It was a really, really good chat we had last night. Starts at 40 minutes. And I think it's in the chapters of the video as well. Apple is down another 4% at 175. So Apple was down 3.58% yesterday to 182, falling from 190. Now it's at 175. That means Apple is down 8% in 2 days. When is the last time we saw Apple go down 8% in 2 days? That is an interesting one to see. Goodness, that is it. So that means the S&P 500, we got the market open in 2 minutes. That means the S&P 500, wow, 443 in the pre-markets. Remember, we were at 438 on the lows 2 weeks ago. Then we ballooned back to 453. You know what's so interesting as well? So CNBC last week, I mean, I can't tell. I get duped by this every time, but every single video was inflation's over, market's time to rally, and they had all these experts talk about the rally. Today, when I woke up this morning and I checked CNBC, my goodness, the amount of people that are saying, shit's going to, everything's going to crash. It's just, and I can't blame them, right? I get it. They're a media company. They have to adjust with the times, but it just goes to show how much no one knows anything. Like, we go from 438 to 453. We didn't have that much crazy news this week. I mean, there wasn't that much. Last week was one of the best weeks in the year for inflation data in terms of private jobs reports, unemployment rate, the JOLTS report. All that shit was amazing. And basically, it seems like none of that mattered because China banned the iPhone. And because the iPhone is because Apple's a lot of the S&P. China makes one decision, all that inflation data just goes to shit. It's incredible. This is the fun part about keeping up with the markets, but it's just always incredible to see how this stuff plays out. All right, here we go. September 7th, 2023. We are back on the roller coaster. It is 9:30 a.m. The markets are now open. Wake your ass up. Here we go. S&P 500, $443. We fall 0.69% to fall from 453, which was a high. Now back down to potentially 438 on the lows for the S&P. C3 AI falling 12% at $27.65. SoFi at $8.30, 2.81%. I'm looking at my portfolio side by side. I am down $4,214.14 because it's just amazing to bleed. The red makes it feel so much better. So for anyone who wants to know how much I'm down, I am down $4,500. Nvidia, $452, down 3.64%. Apple, $175, down 4.2%. Google, $134, down 0.62%. Zscaler had a good earnings yesterday, down to $156. Celsius, flat at $200. Bitcoin, $25,654. Spotify, $159. Spotify really not falling too much. It was at 163, but Spotify recovered from 133 after their earnings on August 25th. So doing a lot better. Palantir, 1472, down 3.8%. This one is down. We haven't seen these levels even after the Morgan Stanley report. So I presume Cathie Wood will be buying today. She bought heavily on the Morgan Stanley 10% decline. This is now even worse than the 10% decline for Morgan Stanley. So we're probably going to see, I would imagine, if I had to guess, some Cathie buys today. Fubo, $2.64. Airbnb, $139.62, falling a little bit from its S&P 500 pump. Netflix, $4.39. PayPal, $61.83. PayPal was doing pretty good. I mean, it was at $64. All of that has been erased now. $61.89. Robinhood at $10.60. Robinhood actually holding up decently, down about 2%, but I thought it would be a little bit more. So Robinhood, not so bad. Tesla, my goodness, Tesla's back down to this 244 level and made it to 257. Came right back down. I don't think anyone should be anticipating a good Q3 earnings for Tesla. I think we can all logically assume Q3 earnings are probably going to suck, especially because the margins are not going to be as good as you would imagine. So it's probably, just not going to be the best for Tesla. Sachin says, I've shared this before. The last 1 to 2 days of the week is softer and red on the same news from which they are generally green on Tuesday and Wednesday. That is also very true. On top of that, we're in September, so we're probably going to be able to see a little bit of red. I love Tom Brady's comment, bye money. That's if I had a kid right now and he was, could you imagine, like if I had a kid and he was just looking at my portfolio, that's something you would say. It's like, bye money. It's like, it's going away. Oh man, Apple is red. Where's Enphase? Where's Enphase? Woo! 121, 1.39%. I got to give it up to my good friend, my buddy, Chris. He was right on this one, folks. I got to give it up to him. Not right on the overall thesis, because I think Enphase actually will be fine long term, but he was definitely right of not buying it at 160 or 150 or 140. I mean, look, now it's in hindsight, it's like, yeah, interest rates high, solar is not going to be adopted, stock comes down. It's a pretty simple thesis. And so he was right on that one. Enphase now at $120.85. Look, I'm still very bullish on Enphase. I think they'll be totally fine. The numbers, if you just look at the growth, is ridiculous. If you don't believe in solar, yeah, you can't believe in Enphase. But if you believe in solar, Enphase should be fine. By 2025, there shouldn't be that much of an issue, especially as interest rates come down. But the existential question is, will interest rates come down, right? And until we come to that conclusion, then we're really not going to know. So we're going to have a lot to see there. Enphase now at 120, Disney at $80.32, Google at 134. Google holding up a little bit, actually. Apple, how bad is Apple now? Apple 174. Goodness gracious. Another 5% decline for Apple in a day. Wow. iPhone being banned in China, because that's the only news from my understanding. It's bad news, but I don't understand why it's dropped the stock 8%, because iPhones are banned in government. I guess the market is assuming that China might take further restrictions to ban iPhones. You know why China might be doing this? This just clicked in my head. Let's go to Roku, by the way. Roku had layoffs yesterday. Let's see how that's affecting Roku. And Roku's still down, even with the layoffs. Apple said they're going to pull out of China to go to India. They've been very public about how they're looking to diversify their manufacturing. Maybe this is China's response to Apple, saying, look, if you keep doing all this pull-out nonsense, then we're actually going to impose stricter and tighter restrictions on you, and you should really think twice before you decide to go to India. That might be one of the reasons why Apple's doing this shit, quite frankly. It kind of makes sense, right? If they're doing this stuff like to push back at them. So I don't know. That could be a reason. Otherwise, I don't know why they did this randomly outside of like buy China, right? Like buy fresh in China, I guess. Do you short any stocks? No, don't short any stocks. Jason, good morning. Good morning. Tess, hello. Thank you for being here. Saskia Rose says, how will we know if when or Palantir does any buybacks? Is that reported quarterly? That will be reported quarterly on the earnings. We will not know until Palantir reports on the earnings if they did any buybacks. So either we'll see a massive print in the stock, right? Or more likely than not, they're going to report every earnings going forward how much they bought back. That's when they have to. All right. We have our girl Gabriela Santos back on from JP Morgan, back on CNBC. If you guys have been keeping up with the channel, I actually like this girl. I like how she presents. I like how she talks. She's someone I can understand very well. So let's listen to her update on what she thinks is going on in the markets right now.
On set, Gabriela Santos, global market strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We're going to be talking to Lee Cooperman a little bit later, and he has a view that I don't want to tell you that his view is negative on everything, but broadly speaking, thinks that equities right now I think are overvalued. Generally speaking, you in the same category?
So I think in terms of our macro view, it's actually improved significantly since the end of May, and we now think the probability is higher for a soft landing. We've also gotten much better earnings data, and actually earnings estimates have moved up 4 percentage points. That doesn't neatly translate into a buy U.S. large cap stocks view because of valuations. And especially because of the contribution of these top 10 stocks, which are now 30% of the index and are at 145% of normal valuations, which is really pulling up the whole index valuation at over 18 times. So if you just take a market cap approach from here, we do think we'll have mid-single digit returns annualized from here. So much more our approach is to either think about an equal weight investing or even more than that, just to take a very, very active approach at all subsectors, to think carefully about valuations and to still think carefully about quality.
So JP Morgan, even with some of the recent decline, at least Gabriela Santos is still pretty bullish on inflation coming down and single digit growth towards the end of the year, meaning S&P 500 would be at like 450, 460ish range. So still green.
How are you guys thinking about China right now? And the reason I ask is this big Apple news, I think, is a big risk in the market, not just to Apple longer term, but to every American firm that does business in China, because there seemed to have been a view that somehow the risk was off the table, that if an Apple has so many employees and people doing business in China through Foxconn and other things, that somehow they would be untouched. But has this changed?
I think there's been building for a few years now this much more buy Chinese sentiment within China. And I think this is a symbol of where we're moving when it comes to trying to access the Chinese consumer, the second largest contributor to global consumption. From here on out, it's going to get harder and harder to do that indirectly through multinational companies, U.S. companies especially, but also European companies.
But do you want to be in those companies, given that it's possible if you cut off, what do we say? It's a fifth of Apple's revenue?
Yeah.
Right. If you cut off that, and I don't know, I'm not suggesting that's happening overnight, but if you sort of take this to its ultimate place, that's what happens.
And exactly, we don't think that there will be an overnight cutoff.
Right.
Just if we think about how much consumers have grown to enjoy certain of these products, as well as the employment that some of these companies.
Well, but that's the question: is how do you measure that risk? How do you look at a Disney that has a park in Shanghai? Could you ever imagine a day where they're like, no, we're not doing it this way anymore?
So we think that complete cutoff is not.
That's interesting. If China were like, nope, forget you, Disney, we don't like you anymore, we're cutting off your Shanghai park, that would be interesting if China did that one day.
Where we're going, we do think over time there will be a migration from Chinese consumption of foreign multinational consumer brands towards much more domestic champions. And so when we think about what we actually want to invest in China, it still is the Chinese consumer. We don't think that story is over because we've gotten some disappointment in the recovery this year. But to do that, we need to be investing in the new Chinese domestic champions, consumer discretionary, consumer staples, healthcare. And by the way, these are companies that are much more attuned to the change in consumption patterns in China to begin with.
This is super interesting, man. What's going on with China is just absolutely incredible. I mean, like, that's tough to see a lot of these companies have to deal with that. We still got some red going on. So obviously, Gabriela Santos and JP Morgan think that China is not going to be the most friendliest to American companies long term. End phase now at 120. It hit 119 at one point. S&P 500 at 443. SoFi at 844. Market making a small little recovery. Nvidia back up a little bit. Apple back up from 176. Is down 3.4%. At one point, it was down 5%. So market's coming up a little bit. Dutch Bros. This is a company yesterday that down 7% today. This is a company that decided to do a $300 million offering to the public markets. Obviously, when you do a $300 million offering, which is about 45 million shares, you are diluting shareholders because you are offering more shares. So basically, if you have 100 shares and you're like, hey guys, we're going to offer 100 more shares. Now, whatever I owned, it's not 10 out of 100 shares, it's 10 out of 200 shares. So I own less overall shares of the company because the company is diluting me by introducing more shares. Why do companies do this? They want to raise capital. And Dutch Bros wants to raise some capital, from my understanding, to pay off some of the debt they have, and that's why they're doing this public offering. I don't know if it matters that much at the end of the day. I mean, companies always do public offerings. I don't think this is highly diluted, but I haven't gone deep into it. I know Chris and Matt talked about it yesterday on their podcast. It's called Cash Flow Chronicles for anyone who wants to check that out. I am not a Dutch Bros shareholder, but yeah, when you do a public offering, the stock's definitely going to drop. And especially on a red day like this, you're going to get a negative 7% day when we see some stuff like that. Tesla above 250. Yeah. So we're seeing a little bit of a recovery here going into 11 minutes of the market opening. Tesla now, or it was at 248. It was just at 244. Where's Palantir? 1452. Palantir continuing to decline 5%. So Palantir not getting any recovery yet. Yeah, I think Kathy will be buying today. Kathy has been buying a bunch of stocks recently. Nothing that's been super interesting. It's weird, they're not paying a premium for Palantir. They're buying on the red days, but when they buy on the red days, they buy a lot on the red days. And one could argue that 1457 is, a cheap thing for Palantir, but they were buying back at 9 and 10. So they do have their average still far below that in the context of where they're buying at right now for Palantir. So we'll see. We'll see if they buy any more going forward today. Palantir down with C3. I don't think C3 brought it down. I think in general, Palantir just went down. I mean, if it was C3, that would be. I don't think Palantir correlates to C3 that much, but maybe. I mean, maybe the market's like, all AI stocks need to go down today. 1450 compared to C3 as a bargain. I agree. I agree with that. Here's a update with Alex Karp. Arnie posted this. Alex Karp just met Finland's Minister of Defense. The Minister of Defense says technology and security are increasingly intertwined. Today, I met Dr. Alexander Karp, the CEO of Palantir Technologies. We had an insightful discussion on the European security situation and how emerging technologies can be used to support both NATO and Ukraine. This is a big deal. And I'm not just saying that because it's a photo op. I'm saying that because the Minister of Defense of Finland is ultimately the guy that informs the head of state if they're going to go with a certain type of technological solution and if it can get approved. The Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom, in the United States, obviously the DoD, they've all had these preliminary conversations with Palantir years ago to be able to get deals that they got back in 21, 2022, and 2023. So I don't know how close Palantir is to Finland, but if we're starting a relationship with them, again, Finland, let me make sure me fact check this. Is Finland part of NATO? I think the answer is yes. Yes, Finland has been part of. Oh, wow. Finland joined April 2023. I forgot. How did I forget this? Yeah, Finland joined. So look, Finland has an obligation to keep NATO safe, to keep Ukraine safe, which means they have an obligation to buy some freaking Palantir software to make sure that they have the best AI-driven technology to not get taken over by an authoritarian regime. Look, if anyone's going to sell them defense software, it's going to be Palantir. So it's really nice to see this stuff happening. Again, that governmental S-curve growth, we haven't seen it yet, but I imagine we would see it if things start heating up in the government space. Here's another thing we saw yesterday. Palantir's Alex Karp met. Where is it at? It's on my Twitter. Oh, here it is. He met the head of state at Estonia yesterday. So this is him walking into a meeting with Estonia. The head of state of Estonia, they discussed medical, healthcare, energy, and defense solutions. There is Lewis Mosley as well, the head of Palantir UK, who's with Dr. Alex Karp here, sitting to discuss potential deals. Again, there's not many CEOs meeting all these heads of states, having these intense discussions about what defense software looks like. I mean, you could argue this is a $50 million discussion that Karp is having right now. And so, again, that governmental S growth when it comes to NATO, remember what Karp said, that the government business catered at 30% for the past 10 years. Some years it was 0, some years it was 70. We don't know what years are going to be 70, what years are going to be 0, but theoretically, if NATO needs software, Palantir will be providing that software. And it's just a matter of time of when that growth ultimately comes. Sasky Rose says public offering should be illegal. Imagine if someone decided to dilute your other assets, like the government saying, oh, by the way, we're giving you a backyard to someone else to raise the money. I don't think it should be illegal because I think companies need to have a way to raise money. And a lot of times they're just doing what they need to do in order to somehow get financing, especially if they can't find financing in other ways. And there's probably other worse things they could do to shareholders than public offerings that, wouldn't be the best. Like, you don't want them to do reverse splits or kind of crazy stuff like that. But in general, the government's always diluting us, right? Like the government adding more debt to the national debt, that's constantly diluting shareholders of the government or of the United States, right? The government raising your taxes. There's a whole bunch of stuff the government does that messes things up. Obviously, I'm not a fan of public offerings. You don't want to see that stuff happen. But if a company needs to do it to grow, I wouldn't make it totally illegal. I would just hopefully it happened once in a blue moon and not be, something that destroys an economy. Also, the company knows it's not good for their stock. So it's not like, if they're getting a short-term injection of cash, it's because they probably really need it because they know if their stock price is going to fall, then the overall value of the company is going to fall. So if they want to sell shares in the market, that's also not going to help them either. They dilute our buying power with money printing every day. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was trying to say. That's how the government always does stuff to us as well in the context of dilution. Let's get a look from Palantir's co-founder who was on today talking about where AI is going in the government space now that we're speaking of governmental spend. Obviously, if the government spends more on AI, Palantir will probably get some benefit from that.
Lonsdale, founding partner at 8VC and a co-founder of Palantir. Good morning to you. It's a fascinating story. By the way, if you pair that story up with that piece in the New York Times last week about the Navy and how much money is being spent actually not on AI. In fact, that it's been such a jobs program that they're not wanting to actually do the right thing. Where are we really? That's what I was going to ask.
This is the big question with any defense spending in the U.S. Which part of it's a jobs program? Which part of it's going to scare our adversaries to not have war? And, the Navy is doing some great things. We have a new company, Saronic, that's actually doing exactly what that announcement says, which is building lots of naval drones with AI. Instead of building just $14 billion ships, you spend one of those $14 billion on 10,000 smart, weaponized drones. That's going to be a lot more effective against our adversaries.
So that's the question, though. Do we need these $14 billion ships anymore?
You probably do need a few big ships. There's an argument for aircraft carriers. It's true in a near adversary confrontation, China could take out some of these things pretty quickly. So you want to complement them with tens of thousands of smaller things. Like right now, we're way too skewed towards the big stuff. We need a lot more small autonomous drones. And we're doing that in the air. We're doing that in the water. This is very important stuff.
Are we overspending?
I think we could cut some of the spending on the military side. That's the job side. And you can reallocate it towards the scare our enemy side and towards advanced technology side.
What he means by that is, please, for the love of God, DoD, put some money into software versus just jobs and random helicopters, because that's the stuff that's actually going to defend us against Russia and China.
The question in defense, Andrew, is how much are they willing to allow competition? So we have all these new companies with the best and the brightest coming in. And if you let us compete evenly, if you let us go to out in the desert and you have their devices versus our devices, for example, in the EMP space, one of the competitions recently, we were 10 times better. We shot down the hardened drones over 9 times farther away for the same size device. This is against people who have gotten billions of dollars of contracts. This is, the company Epirus, for example, a top EMP new company. We still don't win the big contracts because we don't play the same games the same way. But eventually they need to start letting us A, compete, and then B, win for having won the competition.
Joe, I hear you on that. I guess my only question would be the downside, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, is just that if you give them away to too many small companies, you don't have the ability to say, okay, this company is going to be here in 10 years. It's going to be funded. We're going to be able to.
And that's a big question. It's not so right now in the military, there's the systems of record, like the really big contracts, and there's the lots of little things for little small companies. And historically, those little grants are just for you're veteran owned, you're minority owned. It's kind of oh, you're a little kid, which is it's messed up, but that's how they've done it. What we need paths for new companies to become primes. That's what you've seen.
He's critiquing sort of the DEI initiatives, as Sachin mentions here in the chat, around giving contracts to companies just for the pure identitarian views you have on why those companies deserve these contracts. And what he's really talking about is this idea from companies going to primes. I mean, that's Palantir, right? Palantir's mission is to become one of the first software primes. His argument is you need companies that can be here for 20, 30, 40 years, are well-funded, don't have the ability to fail, and are available at a second's notice when the government needs you. And as a result of that, they are rewarded heavily because they are partners of the government.
Anduril doing, so you've seen Palantir doing, SpaceX doing. We need to allow a few more companies to become, from small to the big ones to win the system of record.
So, but what has to happen for that to take place?
For that to take place, you need to have more open competitions. You need to have the results of the competition be a path to a system of record for new companies versus when you talk to senators, they say, Joe, why can't you just sell your companies to the big companies? Well, our best engineers don't all want to go work necessarily at the big companies because their cultures are not the best technology cultures.
I'm not sure that, now, what you think?
And that's a good point, right? You're just saying if Raytheon or all these guys just buy you up, it's like a lot of smart people don't want to work at a Raytheon. They want to work and build their own things. And so what he's talking about here is the meritocratic procurement process of defense technology, hardware or software, that Joe's arguing doesn't really exist as well as it can.
The government would allow you to sell some of these companies, given the regulatory environment, though.
And this is actually a really funny thing about the government is like the DoD will tell you one thing, and then the DOJ and the FTC will tell you, the DoD says don't hire these people with these backgrounds with family in China because they could get information on your company. And then the DOJ sues you if you're Elon or Palantir and says, since you're discriminating against people from China, you're like, okay, well, tell me what you want to do. It's a mess. It's obviously a mess. So yes, they are allowing some acquisitions. They probably should allow more, but they also need to allow us to compete.
Right. I have a actually related question. Did you read this piece in the New Yorker 2 weeks ago about SpaceX?
I think I saw it.
And the satellites, and how much the U.S. and frankly the entire West is now reliant on Starlink, and the power and influence therefore.
I mean, thank God we have.
And thank God we have it.
Yes.
I'm not. But the question is there any competition in that space that's a coming? And if it isn't, what do you do from a policy perspective? Because that's also its own conundrum.
There are a lot of companies that people have tried to start to compete against SpaceX. There's a lot of money being invested for
Bezos is trying to. Everyone's trying to.
Bezos try. There's things that spin stuff around really fast and shoot it up. There's small rockets. There's right now SpaceX is just completely dominant, but it's dominant because it's the best. It's kind of like if you can make the cost 10 times less, thank goodness. So right now SpaceX is winning. I do think there's still competitors. If SpaceX starts to fall, then other competitors will beat them. But right now SpaceX is winning.
Some interesting arguments by Joe Lonsdale. Actually, really interesting to see his perspective there on the defense space. Now, why does this implicate Palantir shareholders? And let's check out the charts one last time. Look, if the defense starts spending a lot of money on AI, where is that money going? Wow, Palantir 1436, down 6.18%. Goodness gracious. What a red, bloody day. Enphase 119. Tesla 245, down 3%. Obviously, if the government starts spending more money, you want that money to go to Palantir from an AI perspective. And as Joe Lonsdale says, it needs to go to the best companies, not just companies because we want to give them some money. NVIDIA at 456, SoFi 828, Apple 176. It's a red day, folks. It's a red day. And tomorrow's not going to be that much better. NASDAQ 13,674 because it's Friday. I mean, maybe it'll go up on a Friday, but Fridays tend to be red. Meta under 300. Now, it's not as red to see like SoFi under 8 or Palantir under 14. We didn't get to that level of red, but it is red. And so there's a little bit of a floor. There are people that are buying the dip, but it's definitely not green. It's still, a pretty red day we have today. Palantir at 1433 down. Picked up some Enphase at 119.50. Let me know if you guys bought the dip already at all. Did anyone in the chat buy the dip at all? Did anyone buy the dip yet? It's 24 minutes into the market. Did you buy the dip? Intel, our good friend Intel, is up. On a day when the market's down, Intel is up 1.77%. I am down $5,824. If anyone wanted to know how badly I am bleeding today. So I am down, stocks down, obviously Palantir, largest holding. So I'm going to be bleeding a little bit today. 37.63 for Intel. Intel has made quite a recovery. Intel was down. Where was let's go to the 1 year on Intel. What was the low on Intel? The low on Intel was 32. So it's up nicely from 32 to 37. Obviously, Intel's not a stock that has high beta up or down or alpha up or down moves because, it's Intel, right? It's been pretty solid, but it did decline. I think it got to 25.80. Didn't it get to 20? What was the 52-week low? Yeah, 23.79. Yeah. So for those that bought Intel at 23.79, which is looking back on it, probably that should have been a dip buy. Intel has done really well. I think they opened up a factory in Germany as well. So Intel has had a lot of catalysts behind it. But just to get back to the mean, this was probably a good dip buy if anyone got it at $23. S&P 500 at 443 currently. We got some people buying Dutch Bros. Path is up 5%. Some people bought Enphase 119, Palantir at 1440. Why is Path up? I have no idea. I don't know if they had a press release come out today. I don't think they had earnings or anything like that. Path is up 5. Yeah, I have no idea why Path is up 5% today. Not really sure on that one. What else do we have? What else do people buy? Unity, Epsilon, Enovix are on my radar if they keep going down. Bought a bunch of MSOS, added 10 shares of Palantir, nibbling on some SoFi this morning. Buy some AUR, UiPath. Oh, Path had earnings? They had earnings yesterday. Do they have good earnings? Let's see their earnings. UiPath earnings. Let's see their earnings. Revenue growth, blah, 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 blah. Let's go to the investor. This is the last thing we'll check. And then we'll do word of the day. And then we'll be done for today. Financials, quarterly results. I just want to see top line numbers. Okay, so top line numbers for revenue of 287 million increases 19% year over year. ARR of 1.3 billion increases 25% year over year. Cash flow from operations 44 million, non-GAAP adjusted 47 million. Announces $500 million. Okay, so they bought back $500 million of stock, growing 20% year over year, on track to do 1.3 billion. That's up 25% year over year. Not bad. Net dollar retention rate 121. They are not profitable yet. They still lost 77 million, but they're getting very close to profitability. Yeah, it seems like a decent quarter from a bird's eye view. It doesn't seem like a horrible quarter at all for earnings. Not at all. Delu says very good earnings for UiPath. Yeah, I mean, looks fine to me. Sachin says we might test 1390, 1403 in Palantir. You know, I've been looking for the 13s to buy. So honestly, if it happens, it wouldn't be the saddest in the world. But let's see. Let's see if we can get there. SoFi has resisted decline better today than most companies. I agree. SoFi has been a warrior in this $8 range. And remember, $8 is still up almost 100% from the May lows of 470. So the fact that it's been consolidating at this $8 range is pretty amazing. They need one really good catalyst to then consolidate in the next range, which I believe is 11 to 12. But until they get that catalyst, it's not going to happen. By the way, Goldman Sachs had a conference with our guy, Anthony Noto, yesterday. And he said deposits are on track, member growth is on track, student loan originations are on track. Basically, there should be no surprises going into Q3. He said everything is on track the way it needs to be. And he also just talked about a lot of the positive things they're seeing in terms of brand awareness and overall growth internally for the company. So Q3, I don't think they're going to be profitable. I think that's going to be Q4, but I think they're going to make a lot of strides to just continue doing what they're doing, which if it's anything like last quarter, it should be a pretty awesome quarter for SoFi. Okay, last thing we're doing today, the word of the day. Here we go. Word of the day. Yesterday, we had the crazy word of the day about Iceland and the Christmas holiday. It was very interesting. Today's word of the day is grandiloquent.
Grandiloquent.
Grandiloquent. Grandiloquent. Speaking or expressed in a lofty style, often to the point of being pompous. Grandiloquent. His grandiloquent speeches may impress some, but they simply bore me. So for me, Alex Karp's grandiloquent speeches are very impressive, even though to some people they're annoying. The politician's grandiloquent promises were unconvincing to the skeptical audience. That's more like Tom Siebel talking on the earnings call. So yeah, this is an easy word to use in your day-to-day life. Grandiloquent.
Grandiloquent.
Basically describing something that's more grand and cool and interesting to see. That's grandiloquent. All right, there you go. That's the word of the day. Grandiloquent is a grandiloquent word. Yep, I agree. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I appreciate it. I'm going to cut up some of me and Sachin's conversation and put it out there on the channel today, so you'll probably be able to see that. I highly recommend everyone go to the Palantir daily live stream I did last night and go to the last chapter, which is Sachin's new company. It's a 50-minute discussion, and I really recommend anyone who has any type of growth mindset to listen to that conversation. Sachin is someone in his 40s. He's made multiple career changes, starting his own company now. I asked him about how he thinks about regret, failure, leaving a legacy for his daughter, all this stuff. It's a new side of Sachin I think a lot of people haven't seen. And so I highly recommend people checking it out because it was just a great conversation. That's it for me. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll see you at Finance Junkies 7 p.m. later today, and then Palantir daily live stream. I believe today should be around 9:20 or 9:30, but I'll be there tonight. Thank you, everybody. Have a great, great Thursday, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.